Yes, we're here. We're live. I think I hit all the right buttons this time. I don't know. I'm not as good at any of this as Kristen is, but it looks like we're live.
We did it, and we're like exactly on time.
Look at that, 4:30 on the dot, Alex.
Nice.
I don't know if that's ever happened before. I'm gonna count it as a win. Any other fumbles or dangle clacks that happened during this stream don't count now because we showed up perfectly on time.
Yeah, that's the rules.
Those are the rules. Welcome everyone to CASAA Live. We are here. It is officially Saturday. We made it. We're live. We're doing the darn thing. I see some familiar faces in chat already. Fa of the QT Ube family. Adrian, Fishy, Addie, welcome everyone. Welcome everybody who's here with us today. And also thank you to the replay crew out there tuning in later, catching all of this juicy THR news goodness that Alex and I guess are going to talk about today. I don't know. I don't really know what our full agenda is today. Alex and I are we're flying by the seat of our pants, and we're going to have a wonderful discussion about civil disobedience and sticking it to the government, sticking it to the man, Alex, sticking it to the man for all the right reasons and maybe some of the wrong ones. Who knows? We'll get into that in just a little bit. Alex, at the end of the hour, you've got some stuff to talk about.
Not really. I think we can avoid a separate legislative rundown here. I will say, if you live in Maine, Louisiana, Alabama, there are active calls to action up for your state, so definitely go check those out. But yeah, there's
nothing like crazy new that we need a whole separate segment for today.
Yeah, nothing new. It's chaos in Louisiana, sure. I think, and Maine is looking at a flavor ban, which goes kind of right into what we're talking about today. So
sure, yeah.
I don't know if we need to run a bumper for it just to break
things up. Do you want me to? I can
do the deep dive thing.
Ooh, you want to dive deep into civil disobedience?
Let's dive deep.
Let's do it. All right, civil disobedience. Let's flip cop cars, burn buildings, pure anarchy. No, that's not what we're gonna do. But we are gonna talk about some civil disobedience. So I'm gonna let Alex kind of start this discussion off, because this topic idea today is kind of like your brainchild. This is something that you've kind of been sitting with for a while and you wanted to talk about. So,
well, I mean, honestly, I think we're all kind of sitting with it. We're all dealing with it, depending on what state you're in. But I mean, even if you're in a state that hasn't taken extreme actions like New York or Massachusetts or California or New Jersey or what Maine is contemplating, you're still kind of living under FDA regulations, which means that most likely any of the open system products that you're buying are likely to be prohibited by FDA rules. So to some extent, everybody in the United States is dealing with this, and I think, well, the impetus for doing this topic today was, within the past week, FDA has conducted what they're calling a nationwide blitz on retailers. And I'm looking at, there were 30 retailers that were issued warning letters. So they definitely got coast to coast and points in the middle. Even a shop in Frederiksted, Virgin Islands, got pinched for selling puff plus banana papaya. And it's interesting, of course, that all of the products that are cited here are either Puff or Hyde brands. And we got a couple in New York. So anyway, this and I guess the week prior, FDA, I guess issuing, I don't know, I can't remember what it's called, but essentially directing customs to seize anything that is Hyde or Puff Bar. And they do this in a way, it's very specific, the brands that they're looking for. So, I mean, there's, 100 other, I'm just picking a number out of the air
here. Sure, I'm sure there's more than 100 other brands of disposable products that are coming in.
Yeah, and they're not on the list, and so this will continue.
Most
And
of them didn't exist last week. You know,
right, yeah, I
that's
mean,
the reality of it too. Is
this is the whack-a-mole that
yeah,
FDA is playing, and of course that game continues down at the state and municipal level. And so,
Mhm.
whenever we talk about illicit markets or people buying products on the underground market, um, the motivations for why someone sells on an illicit market always is the topic to discuss. And so, we as an CASAA has been talking about this for a few years now, several before the pandemic. Um, Notably, Jim McDonald testified in Michigan in response to a proposed flavor ban, and one of the points that CASAA made was, um, people that the state would then be going after for continuing to sell these products are doing this. The words were, out of self-defense, but I think there's a more accurate way to put that, in that you have retailers who want to continue serving their customers because they
Mhm.
know that these are the products that help them stop smoking, and
Yeah.
that this is the retailer, for all intents and purposes, actually being responsible and looking after the people that have made their business a success. And I see we have Mark Sliss in the chat here. Mark Sliss runs a vape shop in the UP of Michigan, um, and continues to help people quit smoking. It's probably done more to help people quit smoking in Michigan than public health authorities. Even though I'm sure they can point to all the effort they put into their shame and blame campaigns, people like Mark Sliss are actually supporting people. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
when it comes
Mark
to
and Bernie. Bernie has helped more people
right,
quit smoking than the vast majority of people that I know in this
yeah,
community. And that's not a slight at any of us who've helped people quit smoking. But that dog deserves an award for the amount of people that they have helped quit smoking.
yeah,
So
yeah.
huge shout out to Bernie and Mark.
So this gets into, I think it's fair to kind of divide up the people who are selling, and I don't know which way this breaks, if it's 50%, 40, 60, whatever percentage of people still selling products. But there is a division here where you have some people who are just taking advantage of the situation, and they can charge a premium for taking that risk of selling an illegal product and still compete with the price of other tobacco products. And then, so they're the people who are kind of they're likely to sort of dip in and out of the market, or dip in
Sure.
and out of a particular region or state and move on to the next one. And then you have people like Mark Sliss who are continuing to just support their customers, supporting
Yeah.
people who want to quit smoking. Um, and
And I mean,
so,
that's been, I guess the industry is, we talk about the independent vapor industry since the beginning. There have been so many people who've gotten into this to help their communities, to help, their friends, their families, and so on and such forth, quit smoking. And there were people who got into this industry because they saw that it was a growing industry. There was money to be made here, and that was it. So, I mean, since the dawn, you can look at any industry, regardless of what you're talking about. There are people who do what they do for good moral reasons, and there are people who do what they do purely for financial reasons. So, I mean, that separation doesn't necessarily change. You know what I mean? It's
yeah. So we're sort of going our order. We'll just try to and what you're talking mention, Fasting Star channel number 5, or Chanel, sorry, I can't type, Chanel number 5, talking about how there's still 7-Elevens in mini marts in Southern California that are selling flavored vapes. And I'm aware of this in my town, all the way up in the tippy top in New York State. I'm sure you've seen it, Logan. But when it comes to retailers selling things under the table, or essentially selling illicit products, one of the things that we've talked about in the past that I definitely want to maybe start off with is what should people be concerned about in terms of the safety of these products, because they're not regulated. We don't know what's in it. You don't know where it's coming from,
sure.
and stuff like that. I'm sort of you still vape. I just use snus. But what has your experience been with that, and your thoughts on sort of the panic that people are trying to
I think,
promote here about using a
yeah,
product that is manufactured and sold
you know,
against FDA regulations?
I felt this way for about a minute at one point too, and I'm just gonna thank Jim for checking me, because that's, I kind of, for a minute, my focus went to what do I know about illicit markets in general and my involvement in them, and the risks that you take when you buy substances, regardless of what that is on the illicit market, and you don't know what's in it, you don't know purity, all these things, massive reasons for why we're in the overdose crisis that we're in right now. But we'll take a step back from that, because this industry was, fairly unregulated for a long time, and we were fine. People mixed in-house liquids for a really long time. We were fine. And the beauty of vaping is that these products are so simple. So there's not much of a financial reason to diverge from the things that work that are also highly affordable. So when you're buying a disposable, I think one of the biggest risks is the actual electronic components of it, regardless of the liquid that's inside, because there's a 99.9% chance or greater than that it's still just flavoring, nicotine, propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin. There's no real reason for anyone to diverge from those four ingredients. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't maybe some of the flavorants or whatnot, aromatics, I guess is the better term here, that may carry more risk than others, because there certainly are aromatics that do carry a little bit more risk than other aromatics do. The grand scheme of those things is that it's all still going to be safer than smoking. So we'll keep that part of it in perspective. I think one of the biggest things that people do need to be concerned with is the actual the electronic components that, we're talking about, whether there's good solders, things like that there are any, safety things put in place here, so your device doesn't start auto firing to the point where that lithium cell on the inside is going to go into thermal runaway, things like that. Those are my concerns with a lot of these like fly-by-night e-cigarette companies. Those are my concerns. It's not necessarily the actual vapor or the liquid that you're going to be inhaling into your lungs, because again, there's really not much of a reason for anyone to do anything different. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's really nothing out there that's going to cost less and work just as well or better. Like you know what I mean? The industry design, like, we found the greatest components to do this with that you can arguably come up with, because the cost is so low, it works so well. There's just not much of an incentive there. But I did kind of go down that road for a minute as well, just kind of falling on my experience with illicit markets. And Jim really was the one, Jim, who's part of our board and just fantastic writer and everything. He's the one that was like, Logan, no, like, this is the reality of it. And I was like, you're right, man. Like, why would I think otherwise? Jim really checked me. So I want to thank him for that, because I felt the same way too. But I still personally think, arguably, if there is any things to be concerned with, it's the actual electronic components. So if you are buying kind of under the counter, generic fly-by-night, weird named vape products that you are very unfamiliar with, just keep an eye on them. Sure, the metals, things like that, or what they're using as a foam possibly as well. So yeah, there are some risks, but I think the liquid in question as to what you're breathing in for the most part is not necessarily the bigger concern here. And I don't really, again, improper metals, cheap metals, sure, less pure metals and heating components, that's a risk as well. I still think at the end of the day, though, the chances of any of these things being nearly as dangerous to your health or risky to your health as continuing to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day, I think is very unlikely. So again, I think it's something that we need to keep kind of in that perspective as well. But I do agree with a lot of the comments in chat here. The coils, wicks, and juice they use in disposables are questionable. Sure. Coils and wicks, a lot of them just simply use a foam. So it's really not even like a wick. But at the same time, this is the same community that used to stick blue aquarium foam down into our atomizers and debridge them. So again, perspective, keep that in mind. Risks associated with improper metals that may be used for the coils in an illicit market. Yes, but at the end of the day, spools of nichrome and canthal are extremely inexpensive. So if we're going down that road, you're just talking about lower quality canthal than good quality canthal. Again, risk comparison to continuing to smoking is probably not that much. So I just, it's one of those areas where I do agree, and I think there is reason to be concerned with it. I think we just need to keep those things into, in good perspective and not roll down the moral panic hill where we're going to end up freaking out that every disposable that comes into the state is just loaded with carfentanil and every, white kid in suburbia is going to die. Like, we don't need to go down that road because there might be low quality canthal in your disposable.
I'm sort of curious, so, another thing to talk about. First of all, with your point about the components and the stuff that actually makes up the device, and the quality of those products. I know that, pre-pandemic, VTA, the Vapor Technology Association, had a conference in DC, and one of the kind of highlights, I guess, was this, presentation, or it was one of the things that was in kind of the swag bag, was an 18650 battery that Radio Shack had made, and it had some sort of fault protection in it, and the point was that if the regulations were better, then companies would be more. It would be easier for companies to make safety improvements, for example, using safer batteries. But the way that things are now, that again, like anything else, will take millions of dollars in research and development and putting together an application and explaining to FDA that, we need to use this battery instead of the other one for safety reasons. Sure. And so, there's certainly a comment there about how the regulations can be more accessible to manufacturers.
Froze, quote unquote, right, a lot of innovation.
Yeah.
I think at the time they did, but we've kind of moved past that.
Yeah.
In general. But yeah, and this comes back to the argument that instead of, all of the bureaucratic red tape and freezing the market and deeming regs and everything, the PMTA process, all of the hubbubaloo that we're in the middle of right now. I really wanted to use a stronger word there, but I won't, Julie. This really comes back to, exactly. NorCal Vaping, manufacturing standards would have been the most appropriate route to go for both devices and e-liquid. In general, manufacturing and product safety standards would have eliminated these concerns, or at least maybe not eliminated, because you can't, necessarily eliminate everything, but dramatically reduced these concerns that people have.
So the thing that I sort of cut myself off with was, again, to what you were talking about is adding things to the liquid, and this would be a cost cutting exercise. Usually that's what illicit manufacturers do.
That's what we saw with the Volley.
That's what we saw with the Valley, and the lung injury cases from 2019.
Yeah,
throw in all those extra words because that thing, that name is total dog shit. So we had.
Does that mean I can swear now too?
I'm going to say that bullshit or dog shit are technical terms, and so they are allowed on this program. But I guess this is a few weeks ago. Julie. May 18th, there was an op-ed by former HHS Secretary Tom Price on the Fox News website. So take it with a grain of salt. But obviously, this is there's been a movement on the right to induce some China phobia here,
Oh,
and get some. I'm not going
what
to
a
talk about.
shocker.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the merits one way or another about it, but it's always unfortunate when we see people who are otherwise could be considered allies and certainly acknowledge the harm reduction aspects of vapor products. Notice I didn't use the word potential there. Um, but and then sort of turning around and feeding into the fentanyl hysteria in saying, without reference to any specific report, that reports suggest that China is not only boosting levels of nicotine content, but adding fentanyl, or maybe adding fentanyl to vapor products. I don't know that we've seen reports from sheriff's departments, which are to me, it's hard to take that with a lot of credibility, considering that a lot of law enforcement agencies seem more inclined to promote the drug war than they are in protecting public health and safety. I don't know. I mean, have you actually seen any credible reports of fentanyl ending up in what someone thinks is a nicotine product?
No.
And even if it did, I think this is, and I'm really just basing my thoughts on this off of a Twitter post from Ryan Marino several months ago, saying that, and again, this is not something I've seen reports about. So if anybody's out there who has seen a write up or some sort of journal article or otherwise about fentanyl vaping as harm reduction, I'm curious to read about that. There are obvious benefits to. I mean, this is not something that someone would buy. It's not somebody buying a Puff Bar or a Juul and then finding out later that it's got
those
fentanyl
products
in
are
it.
not going to achieve the heat that it requires to reach the boiling point for fentanyl. And
Yeah,
I think
these are products that would be specifically
designed
used
for
for fentanyl.
yes,
And then of course there is some obvious harm reduction aspects here where you're not dealing with an injection.
sure,
And so you've done away with needle sharing or whatever. And then on the other, another aspect of this is people have more control over the dosage, in that it because a lot of the molecule is destroyed in heating it up. So you're
yeah,
getting a smaller dose. And that's, this is part of, being an adult and taking drugs, that go slow, listen to your body, and,
yeah,
give yourself time. It's good advice for taking, edible THC products is,
sure,
give it time, man, before you eat the whole cookie, and
sure,
stuff like that. And so there is, this is all hearsay at the moment, whether you're talking about fentanyl in nicotine products or, people using fentanyl vaping. As far as I know, these are all just words not backed up by anything written.
yeah,
But I think, and a point that I have made to someone who works at a tobacco company is, I think it's a mistake to jump on the fentanyl hysteria when these products could actually be very important to harm reduction, and the drug poisoning crisis that we're facing now. But again, all of that to say, and you've already answered the question, was I don't know that we have credible reports of
yeah. No,
fentanyl
there aren't
ending
any
up in nicotine products.
credible reports, and you're not gonna find puff bars and like jewel pods laced with fentanyl. The devices just won't do it. At most, you may be able to mess up that pod or device enough where you're going to get some fentanyl residue spit back. But as far as the actual, heating of the molecule and inhaling it, they're just not designed to do that. They're not designed to reach that high of a boiling point. So, I want to make the point that no, there is not fentanyl in the disposable vapor products that you are buying under the counter at your local 7-Eleven. That's just not a thing. And we really need to avoid buying into, that hysteria as well. Really quick, NorCal Vaping said a good example is the foam wick they use in disposables. How well does it hold up to the heat of the coil? Does it break down and release dangerous chemicals? Maybe at some point that foam might break down and release dangerous chemicals, probably long after the liquid is gone. So that's kind of the glory of, I guess, it being in a disposable, is you're not going to continue vaping it at the point at which it would be really detrimental to your health. You're going to have to fight through dry puffing for quite a while, which in itself, you're already there releasing, more harmful chemicals and whatnot at that point. So I guess the glory there is that it's a disposable and not meant to be used that long. But yeah, as far as the whole fentanyl and vaping thing is really just this huge and currently incredibly racist scare tactic that we're seeing to stoke, Chinese fear and Chinese hate, and to embolden the drug crusade that we're on against fentanyl and people who use fentanyl. But yeah, your point about vaporizing and using these, I guess a different vaporization system. It's like the difference between vaping a nicotine vape and using a dry herb vaporizer for cannabis. They are two very different devices. Sure, they heat a product that you inhale. That's pretty much the only similarity that they have besides having a battery. Otherwise, the heating elements are different. The voltages are different. All of those things are different. They're made to do very different things with different products. And as far as, the I guess, area of safety or whatever, smoking or vaping a substance is always going to be less risky than injecting it, not only because of needle sharing, like you mentioned, but also the reuse of needles. People who don't have access to clean needles to use a clean needle every single time. I used to have a really great, excuse me, I could probably find it if I wanted to really dig for it. Close up under a microscope image of a needle that was used once, same needle used twice, 4 times, and 6 times. And those needles literally become jagged, barbed hooks. And this is where things like abscesses come into play, because you are just tearing apart your skin, you're damaging and destroying veins. And it's really not pretty. So when you eliminate that and you go to vaping a substance or smoking a substance, you are taking less of a risk. And yeah, again, also you're able to kind of moderate or regulate your dosage, maybe a little fine tune it a little bit more. But that's not to say that people who aren't experienced drug users aren't able to do that part of the situation or whatever if they know what they're getting. Which is also a big part of that. But yeah, great advice though. Go slow, start low.
I'm sort of curious. I mean, if this does catch on and people are thinking about fentanyl and vapes, like, the problem with disposables is that they're not designed to be opened. So how does someone test with a test strip, a fentanyl test strip? I
don't think you would be able to. You wouldn't be able to, because a fentanyl test strip, you essentially need a small amount of a powder, something that you could dissolve in a small amount of water, and that's how you test with a fentanyl test strip. You would need to dissolve it in a solution, and then essentially let that test strip wick that solution up into it. And I don't believe any of this either. This is like decades of just they're not lacing all the pot with opium. Chanel No. 5. That's not a thing.
I know somebody recently kind of refuted that there is actually no real evidence that marijuana has been
again when we combust something, which this is the reason why people say smoking crack, you don't smoke crack, you actually vaporize crack. Because when you put a flame and combustion happens at 2000 degrees onto cannabis or whatever, a lot of those other drugs just don't stand up to the heat. So even if you are getting any of it at all, it would be at such small amounts. It's just not worth it. There's way better ways to use those drugs than to dust it on some I don't know, sour diesel or something. Like it's just not a thing. I mean, sure, it may happen once in a while in a great blue moon. Like I've watched people dust their own pot with cocaine and get nothing out of it. Sure. Does it happen? Yes. Does it happen in any grand scale where we in the public need to be concerned? And does it work very well? No.
Yeah, well, and to the continuing comment, I don't want to dismiss reports of people getting tainted drugs. We know it's happening,
Sure,
but
sure. It's just very
it,
infrequent when
it's
it comes to
it's
cannabis, just because
yeah,
it
and
just
it's
doesn't work
still
very well.
there's some chemistry involved here.
Yeah.
There's some stuff involved that so anyway, and unfortunately, I think, and this is um, part of this conversation, is that it's very difficult to trust law enforcement who are being asked about what's going on and treated as the primary source. I know I know people probably have varying opinions about John Oliver and some of the other folks out there, but I know people have looked into the credibility of reports about this, and journalists who are using as a primary source the local law enforcement versus people who were actually there, people who may
Yeah.
be involved with this stuff. So it's very hard to trust what we're hearing from law enforcement on
Yeah,
this,
we really just need to
on the
not
whole
talk to
drug
cops about
issue, whether
drugs.
it's nicotine or something else.
Yeah. Yeah. You hear reports about cops fainting, rapid heartbeats, sweating, all of these things from dusting some fentanyl off of their jacket. Skin contact doesn't work that quickly with fentanyl. It just doesn't. That's not how the science works. And 90% of these symptoms that you hear that police are having, and they had to take 7 doses of Narcan in order to wake up. And I've heard reports from police officers saying that they had to self-administer Narcan, which isn't a thing. If you're actually experiencing an opioid overdose, you're not able to self-administer Narcan. But most of these are symptoms of a panic attack. These are not respiratory depression. This is not. These aren't opioid overdose symptoms, and it's really absurd, and it's really disheartening to see the people who are sworn in to serve and protect us lie and mislead and put more people at greater risk, especially when it crosses over to, I've heard reports of EMTs being so scared to get in and administer Narcan to somebody experiencing an overdose because they were afraid of skin contact with that substance. And when you have somebody, an EMT who's meant to get right there, and every second literally counts when it comes to somebody experiencing an overdose, who has been misled and lied to and is now in a state of fear from saving that person's life. That's just heart-wrenching to me. That's just devastating. There's 2 doses of Narcan in my lunch bag that I carry with me every single day, and there's no hesitation in my mind as to whether or not I would get to somebody and use that. And obviously Narcan isn't Narcan is just the first step. Know and learn CPR, know the risks, and obviously still call 911. But yeah, it's just the misinformation involving fentanyl and all of this stuff right now is absolutely crazy, and it's heartbreaking, and people are dying.
And to throw a larger point in here, this all goes to the erosion of credibility. I mean, we've just sort of demonstrated the erosion of trust with law enforcement, but these are talking points that are being picked up by former officials at HHS. Obviously, certainly members of Congress have been bandying these points about, not just this year, but it's ramping up. Of course, all the threats of the border policy issues. Apparently fentanyl is just pouring over the southern border now. All of these things, and when that is not happening, ultimately people lose trust in leaders, people who are supposed to be leaders.
Sure.
And to try my best to weave that back into the illicit market. We had a quote at the top of the hour. Actually, I'm going to scroll all the way back up here.
And I mean,
of the QT Ube family noted that there was a
I
shop.
love ube so much, by the way. I don't know if anybody knows what ube is, but it's like a purple sweet potato, and they're delicious.
Nice. But noting that there was a shop in Massachusetts, I guess near this person, that stayed open in 2019 during the ban, but they eventually got ratted out. And of course, taking this back to Massachusetts, we know that Massachusetts flavor ban really just benefited New Hampshire the most. and I think it was Reason Foundation published a report showing that smoking prevalence actually went up in certain groups. And so again, this is another thing that erodes the credibility of lawmakers and the government. Always question the government, of course, but we should be able to have some confidence that they are working in our best interest. After all, that's where our money goes. And so, we have seen time and again in states that have prohibited sales of flavored products, people just keep buying them. And so I wanted to ask you, because again, I don't vape anymore. So, but even if I did, I know where I could buy these things. What has been your experience with going to, for example, a reservation and continuing to buy flavored products in New York State?
My experience has been fantastic. I'm also very fortunate that I live very close to a reservation. And it's I'm always as respectful as I can be, and we tip the bud tenders there and stuff like that as well. But yeah, I mean, it's essentially, at least where we go, is really no different than walking into the once great shops that were here in the city before that. Almost all of the same identical products that were sold where I used to go are sold there. There is a much lower selection of devices, but still walls of liquid. There are walls and walls of disposables. The products that have been prohibited from entering our country, there are walls of those. But yeah, it's a cash only situation, and my experience is always great. There's a lot of, especially where we go, there's a lot of really knowledgeable staff there. They're very helpful, very friendly. And I'm in there all the time because I lose a pod or break a pod or whatever, because I stopped bringing expensive devices to my landscaping dirty job that I do. So I'm always losing pods or breaking pods or something like that. And, they're really great, and they're really helpful up there. And I think that's a great example of this kind of civil disobedience that's happening, but in a really great way. You think of like people like, the dirty people selling stuff under the counter and this illicit, horrible black market and all of this, but it's not. It's just a beautiful, well taken care of, clean shop with really great, wonderful, helpful staff who just want to help people quit smoking, and that's it. And I've sat in there plenty of times, looking around and listening to conversations like I used to do in my old vape shop with some of these folks who are coming in and trying to quit smoking for the first time, and they're just, it's that same exchange of like, well, how much do you smoke? What do you, what things do you like? Maybe are you a big fan of fruits? Do you like drinks? Do you like cakes? And like those same conversations that were happening in the vape shops I used to visit in state are still happening there. I feel like Mark Sliss would feel right at home and be just as proud of every single one of those people in there helping people quit. But yeah, that's really just how it goes. And I can't speak for every shop that's on the reservation near me. There are multiple shops out there. It's just the one that we go to is just fantastic, and I think that's a great example of this civil disobedience, but in all the right ways for all the right reasons.
Yeah, and I guess the civil disobedience aspect of this is I think that I can see how easily this gets called into question. But I imagine there are plenty of shop owners who are still operating sort of in defiance of the federal regulations that probably don't even think about it as taking a stand, or they're really just doing their job, and they want to help their community members, and they think that the regulations are wrong, but it's for them it's more of just business as usual. I don't know that significant is stand that rule.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you're knowingly breaking a law that you believe to be unjust for the right reasons, that's civil disobedience at its heart. And that's just the most punk rock thing I can think of. And I love it so much. So thank you for everybody out there doing that. But yeah, how many vape shop owners invested everything everything they had into opening a vape shop to serve and help their community and help their friends and family quit smoking. And then you're faced with that choice of shuttering your doors and losing everything that you've worked for, that you've put all of your money into, your time, and trying to start over. For a lot of people, that's also just not an option. So business as usual has to be the option for as long as it can be. You know, and I think that's a very real situation for a lot of folks as well. Is it's not necessarily, you know, F these regulations, F the government, you know, I'm going to keep helping people because it's the right thing to do. It's, this is my only option. This is what I've invested my everything into. And I have to do this until I can't. I think that's a very real situation for people as well too. So.
Yeah. And I do want to clarify because, first of all, Fa of the QTube family is QTube, not T Ube. There's a typo there, so I'm glad we got that.
I still like T Ube better.
It rolls off the tongue weird, but it works. And then, of course, just to clarify that the 2019 ban in Massachusetts, that was the sales ban that was in response to the lung injuries, not the flavor ban that was eventually passed. So that was an example of the state going just batshit crazy over something they didn't understand. And of course, THC products were allowed back on the market before vapor products were. That was interesting.
Yeah, and Mark is correct.
Yep. So, about that. That vape shops, I'll read this for folks who are just listening. Technically, every U.S. vape shop is already in violation of federal regs if they sell open systems or disposable anything other than Views or Enjoy. Basically, that comment from Mark. Thank you for clarifying that. One thing, we are coming up on the end here. I did it's just us talking about illicit markets and civil disobedience. So we weren't going to go for too long today, but I did kind of want to make a point that since we were talking about shopping on the reservation, you know, the FDA has released a new campaign targeted at Indigenous Alaskan youth, I believe. It's pretty specifically targeted to Alaska, but it is targeting our Indigenous community. And there is a small, slowly growing movement among Indigenous people who are involved in tobacco control. And it is this idea of returning tobacco back to its sort of sacred uses and roots, which I find it interesting that, I mean, that's a very legitimate point of view. I totally appreciate it. And I think, you know, it is actually more in line with sort of adjusting and educating ourselves on how to use drugs, and that these substances need to be treated with respect.
Sure.
But the other part of this is that, you know, the FDA guy who spoke at E-Cigarette Summit had really no hesitation in stating that tobacco has absolutely no redeeming value whatsoever. And that seems to be absolutely contrary to anyone in the Indigenous community advocating to preserve it as a sacred plant that is used in ceremonies and other, you know, sort of infrequent practices. Religious and otherwise. I had two words that went to that.
Spiritual.
And I'm sorry, I spaced it, but
yeah.
This is a question for somebody from the Native American communities. You know, how does that make people feel when the federal regulator you're turning to, or that you're sort of hitching your wagon to reduce the use of tobacco or nicotine, turns around and says there is no redeeming quality to this plant that your culture has been using for centuries? I just there's a disconnect there, and I don't see that it's helpful.
Well, I mean, obviously that disconnect starts with a lack of respect for Indigenous people, you know, and their spiritual connection or religious connections or whatnot to tobacco. Like first and foremost, yeah, that's where that comes from. And I think that's also, FDA continuing to drill in this idea that, again, tobacco has no redeeming qualities, even though Indigenous and non-Indigenous people have been using tobacco for a really, really long time because of its redeeming qualities. So,
yeah,
or at least, using nicotine for its redeeming qualities. So, yeah,
so
it's a massive, massive disconnect where they don't want to, give any weight to or recognize, I guess, people's, I don't have the right word for it here. Yeah, I don't have the right word for it here. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it. But yeah, well, it's just a massive lack of respect and acknowledgement from FDA because they just want to continue to hammer home that all tobacco bad.
Yeah.
That idea of, all tobacco bad. That's it. There's, they're not going to or not willing to make an exception in any way for, religious purposes or something like that, because then it's like, well, you can't just share a cookie with one kid in class. You now have to share a cookie with everybody. Now you have to start acknowledging these other exceptions and acknowledging these other things. And that's a domino effect for FDA that they don't want to deal with.
They do ultimately, and I mean, at least the laws do. Federal laws acknowledge that some of this is not applicable to native land and the I don't know if tribal municipality is the right way to say it, but on tribal land there are federal laws that don't have any strength, and they do acknowledge, at least in some state laws, acknowledge smoking for religious or ceremonial purposes or theatrical productions. It's weird that they're on sort of the same level in the statute, but states do acknowledge stuff like that. So it is sort of ultimately the law does acknowledge it, but the campaigns, all of the campaigning coming from health officials,
it's because the campaigns are what people are going to see, like
right.
in mass. Like that's what the people will see, not necessarily what's in, subsection 3, paragraph 4 of your state statute, which most people are not going to see.
Yeah. So the last thing I wanted to just bring up, and we talked about this beforehand. Steve Toddenham brought this up, and I've heard this from someone else this past week. 2 new shops just opened up near me. I'm sure they don't have a clue about the laws, and this is one of the things that has sort of been shocking me for the past 7 years. Following FDA deeming being finalized in 2016, we would still get calls every now and then from somebody who says, I'm opening up a shop. What do I need to know? First of all, we're not the trade association, so I'll give you that email address. Second of all, have you heard about the Food and Drug Administration? And so there have been people opening up shops this whole time. And I guess the question here, and to kind of bounce it off of you, was, we've talked about the iron law of prohibition, that as the stricter the regulations get, the stronger the drugs get. And so I think this is kind of part of this, that the stricter the regulations get, the more likely we are to see people opening up actual businesses. But I suspect they're sort of dipping in and out of the market. And much like what we're seeing, this whack-a-mole that we're going to keep playing with disposable products coming in from abroad, the company name will change, or these people will get in, they'll be there for a few months, maybe a year or two, and then they'll get out when they get caught. I don't know if they're budgeting for whatever monetary penalties are coming their way, but that is also a bit of a risk, in that you have unscrupulous retailers who they're not really motivated to do things like check age, or follow those rules. They may or may not care about the quality of the products that they're selling, which, again, just to emphasize for those joining late, we are talking mostly about the quality of the devices, not so much the liquid, which is very hard. Liquid is hard to screw up. But I'm certainly, if they're not manufactured in the right way, there could be impurities in there. And actually, the other person
like that, yeah, absolutely.
The other person that I spoke to about this was talking about shops who are they do the manufacturing on site. I don't know if it's the kind of squirt bottles that some places had where it basically looked like a bar behind the counter.
In-house squirt bottle liquid, dude, is how I quit smoking, man. 18 milligram strawberry lemonade, and I cloud chased it like crazy in-house because it was $10 for a 60 ml bottle of it. It was great, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the first real vape shop experience I had in New Jersey, you know, he was, you know, mixing a bottle on demand. Like, you know, the samplers were there.
Yeah.
And if you wanted it, he'd go back, you know, what nicotine strength do you want? And
do you want any extra sweetener in there? You know, it was a la carte, man. It was great. That's how I quit smoking. So I have a deep love and appreciation for you know, in-house liquids and stuff like that. It tends to be a much more affordable option for people, which can be a huge deterrent for people switching that out of the gate upfront cost of switching from smoking to vaping. After you buy a device, you buy a battery, you buy all the extra things, that adds up really quickly. And so, you know, the introduction with in-house liquids can be a really great way to kind of mitigate that cost. That was my reasoning initially. And it definitely worked for me. It's helped, I don't know how many thousands of people. So yeah, I have a deep love and appreciation for people still mixing in-house. I would say keep going, and just, you know, be responsible, be clean as you possibly can be. You do still have a responsibility to keep your customers and your community as safe as possible. But you know, outside of that, like, it's liquid, man. It's
yeah.
As long as you're in a sterile,
I'd like to
environment,
see,
you know.
I think it would be. I mean, we're sort of. I am taking us a bit off topic, but not really. You know, I think I never really saw anything wrong with in-house mixing.
No.
You know, as long as somebody is doing it in a sanitary way, and there are, I think, very simple standards to communicate to someone manufacturing like that, that they can, you know.
Yeah, most kitchens that you go eat from are less clean. I mix in my office on my desk, you know, without gloves. And I'm not making recommendations. You guys should, you know, wear gloves, do things the right way, and keep yourselves as safe as you can. But I've definitely mixed up a bottle of e-liquid right here at my desk with no gloves on, just chilling. And I vaped it, and I didn't die, you know. I had no issues. So again, I'm not condoning doing things unsafely. We should all be, you know, trying to be as safe as we possibly can be. But to put those risks in perspective, I mean, it's really not, you know, if you're really concerned about, you know, the in-house liquid that you might get from a shop, then don't buy it. You know, I guess it's like, you know, I can't stand the violence I see on this TV channel. Change the channel. Yeah. You know, we don't need to call any managers or anything like that about it. It's going to be okay.
And certainly not a cause for stoking hysteria.
Yeah, public hysteria.
You know, and this is not just that's not just something directed at the anti groups. I know that within the industry, people will say things in order to compete amongst themselves, and you know, sort of discrediting or tarnishing the reputations of another type of establishment, so that they, you know, they think that they're going to bring all that business over to them. It's not. I don't know. It might be worth it for you on your books, but in terms of advancing the cause here of giving people options to quit smoking, I don't think that serves anybody's interests. And so, you know, there is as we, you know, wind things down here today, you know, a word of caution, I guess, to our members and folks who are in the industry, that, you know, be very careful about the talking points we align ourselves with. And I think this, you know, the China fentanyl thing is going to be, I don't know how much longer this is going to go on. It's very obviously a partisan set of talking points, to drum up fear and outrage issue. Political the season, and we're getting started. But, you know, really at the end of the day, this has always been about giving people who smoke options to move away from combustion. And I think, we'll keep belaboring the point here. The making a smoke-free nicotine product is really not that difficult. There are, even if it's manufactured in sort of a questionable type of scenario, which we don't want. That's why we want the regulations to be more accessible.
Yeah, and say all of this is an argument for better regulation, and
ultimately,
in a fair playing field is really what all of this is about, and that's been the argument about every banned and illicit substance. When you talk about all these quality concerns, purity concerns, safety concerns, all of that can be answered in a fair, responsible, regular place, as opposed to the path that we continue to go on.
Yeah. And so, even if you are purchasing products from an illicit seller, it's always going to be buyer beware. It doesn't matter whether you're going to Target or you're going to someone selling something out of the back of their car. Be aware of what you're getting into. But nicotine products that are not cigarettes are more likely to be safer than continuing to smoke, almost no matter where you get them from. So, and that is, this is the more that FDA tightens the screws, and really it seems that they've just picked the easiest thing. It's not the easiest thing to deal with, but enforcement is something that they can do to grab headlines and make it look like they're doing something productive, when the reality is that it's really just causing, at least on paper, more risk for consumers. And the people most harmed by this are folks who are just not even going to try switching to something, and they'll just keep buying cigarettes. With that, I hope this has been at least a thought-provoking conversation, and again emphasizing that probably I have no read on this. Another thing that sort of came to light last week was I was trying to answer a question for a reporter who was asking, how many manufacturers are making products for the U.S. market and how many retailers are there? And the answer is nobody really knows. There have been credible estimates over the years in terms of the size of the market and how much of it is closed systems versus the open systems and specialty retail shops. And I would suspect that, given FDA's inability to do their job, now most of the market is going to be open system products and disposable products that are, two completely different things, but all independent. These are not products coming from incumbent tobacco companies. They are coming from the independent vapor industry. So we've sort of, the pendulum has shifted back from, big tobacco products to the people who actually got the nicotine alternative nicotine industry started. And I've completely lost any ending I had in mind for that particular stream of thought. But
civil disobedience for the win, though. Look, I'm all for it. Especially when that civil disobedience is rooted in love and compassion and helping your community and defying unjust laws for all the right reasons. I fully support it. I back it all day, every day. It's the most punk rock, most loving thing that I can possibly think of. And so if that's you, if that's you out there doing it, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And thank you for it.
I think that's a great note to end on. And I'm gonna leave it to you to say all of the things.
Spiel time. Cool. All the things. I'm going to see if I can make everybody real proud on the board right now. Thank you, everybody who tuned in today. Everybody out there, Janine, Mowgli, Duchess, Glenn, Steve, everybody in chat today. Thank you guys so much for being here and tuning in and being part of the conversation. Thank you to the replay crew. If you just finished this video up, you're a fantastic person. Thank you. If you have not yet visited CASAA.org, this is where you're letting me down. You're breaking my heart right now. Head over to CASAA.org, become a member today. It's absolutely free. We promise not to fill your inbox and your emails up every day, just with what you need to know when you need to know it, the most important things that are going on. And while you're there, if you've not yet submitted a testimony about your quitting smoking journey, wherever you are at in that journey and what products you are using and which ways you are using to get there, please share it. Every testimony counts. We have over 13,000. And it's a drop in the bucket for what we need. We need like 13 billion, you guys. So get to work, share your stories. They're the most valuable, important things that we have. While you're there, if you do or are so inclined to hit up our donation box, that would be fantastic. So we can continue doing all of these things that we do. That way we can keep doing all of that stuff, and maybe check out our merch while you're there. Danielle Jones, our president of the board, has designed some really awesome swag. You guys get to be walking billboards of tobacco harm reduction. So go check it out. Awesome stuff over on the CASAA site. I believe we are here, same time, same place, 2 weeks from now. Remember, the show is every other Saturday nowadays, you guys. I think this year was the year we kind of switched. We were doing an every Saturday show for a long time. Exhausting. We all just wanted to beat our heads against the computer, so we took a step back. We do a show every other week now. It's a great time, gives everybody a chance to reflect, gives Kristen time to repost things and create cool content that goes out on social media and stuff like that. Share the stuff. Alex, one more time before we go, can you just recap those states that really need to be concerned about the active calls to action that we have out right now?
Yeah, I was actually just asking Peggy at eSig Source if and I'm sorry that I misspelled plastic. I do still have a bunch of battery cases with CASAA logos on them. They're the old CASAA logos. Hit me up on the DMs or send an email to aclark@casaa.org.
Slide into Alex's DMs.
I can work out some way to ship them to you. Yes, Peggy, send me an email, aclark@casaa.org. I'll probably get to it on Monday or Tuesday, but if you want some, I can ship them to you. There's no cost. I will always ask if you wanted to cover, if you can cover the shipping, but they are just occupying space in my closet right now, and happy to ship them out. I have thousands. Yeah.
Alex needs space for all of his killer art that he does. You guys should check out Alex's art. It's pretty dope.
Thanks. Thank you. But to answer your question, Logan, yes, people in Maine, Louisiana, or Alabama, go to the CASAA website, look under Get Involved and State and Local Issues, and you will see active calls to action. They may not have been updated with the most recent hearing information because this is the end of the week and I'm about ready to not work for 2 days. So, but we will be updating those as things happen, and they are active. So get your letters to lawmakers fingers going, Maine, Alabama, and Louisiana. And I think that is a wrap.
I think that's a wrap. My final thought is you don't have to wait for a call to action either, you guys. It is always a great time to reach out to your local lawmakers and share your stories. It is always a good time to do that. You don't necessarily have to wait until shit hits the fan to have your voice be heard. That's it. That's cool. It. I think we did all the stuff. I think we did all the things. We're out of here.
Everybody enjoy your weekend.
Yes, enjoy the rest of your weekend, you guys. Be excellent to each other. We will see you next time.